In the midst of the 19th century, the Civil War thundered across America. 11 southern states had several points of disagreement with the federal government in Washington, D.C., including their desire to exist as a loose confederation of states as opposed to a single nation, and their right to own slaves as property. If the South won the war, the country would be a group of neighboring individual states, one having little in common with the next. If the North won, America would truly be the United States. By the summer of 1863, the war between the states had been raging for more than 2 years. Confederate General Robert E. Lee led his Army of Northern Virginia in a major attack on the northern states, with the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, becoming the site of a key battle. Major General George Gordon Meade, having just relieved Major General Joseph Hooker of his command of the Army of the Potomac, and under the orders of President Abraham Lincoln, fought to keep Lee and his troops from moving through Pennsylvania and on into the north. Despite skirmishes that favored both sides, Union troops were eventually successful in forcing Lee and his men to retreat with great casualties. In the 3 days of July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, the area in and around Gettysburg became the site of one of the bloodiest battles in the U.S. Civil War. More than 10,000 soldiers from the North and South were killed, 30,000 were wounded, and another 10,000 were missing or taken prisoner in this Battle of Gettysburg. More than 30,000 dead and wounded soldiers were left on the battlefields. 4 months later, on November 19, 1863, the Soldiers' National Cemetery was dedicated at Gettysburg. It was the final resting place for 3,500 Union soldiers, with 3,200 Confederate soldiers relocated to cemeteries in the South after the war. The solemn ceremony featured a speech by politician and public speaker Edward Everett. He addressed the crowd of 15,000 for more than 2 hours. Then President Lincoln stepped to the podium.
87 years ago.
A score is 20 years, so Lincoln was referring to 87 years back, when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776.
Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty.
Our ancestors had left England and came to North America to start a new country based on freedom,
and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
This new country wanted to avoid religious conflicts and slavery.
Now we are engaged in a great civil war.
That country is now at war with itself,
testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure.
Fighting to determine if any nation built on the idea of freedom can survive.
We are met on a great battlefield of that war.
This area is the scene of the Battle of Gettysburg.
We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live.
This area will become a cemetery for soldiers who died for what they believed in.
It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this.
There is no question that this is the right thing to do.
But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground.
Looking at the big picture, the group gathered today has no right to make this land special.
The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract.
Those who fought and died here have made the area special more than we ever could.
The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here.
Lincoln was wrong and right here. The Gettysburg Address became his most famous speech and The Battle of Gettysburg was a turning point for the war, which led to the reunification of the United States.
It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us.
It is up to the rest of the country to finish the job of rebuilding our nation.
That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion.
Those who died here should inspire us to continue and complete their work to save the Union.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.
We hope that these soldiers did not die for no good reason.
That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
That the United States of America, supported by a government of its citizens, will not dissolve and cease to exist. In contrast to Everett's 2-hour speech, Lincoln spoke for just over 2 minutes. The next day, newspapers across the country printed the Gettysburg Address, with reactions based mostly on which political party the publications supported. Republican papers praised the eloquence of Lincoln's words. Democratic papers poked fun at the president for the shortness of his speech. No matter, those words would become known around the world, and they would be carved into a wall of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Even though the Civil War continued for another year and a half, the Battle of Gettysburg was considered by many to be the turning point. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address supported the hopes that the outcome would secure the concepts of freedom and equality in the United States of America.